Yes, I'm here in London again for the Business Property Relief Summit at the Palladium, Andrew Lloyd Webber's venue. We're lucky enough to be going into. Now we finally got here to London. Let's go and see what it's all about. No overalls today, nice and smart in my shirt and jacket.
The only thing that's ever constant in business is change. Working with family in a business can be easy in some aspects, but also difficult in others. And I'm sure you can all think of examples of each. Most of you in this room, this splendid room, are generational businesses such as my own. My family's been on our farm for 4 generations in Tarwick, which is near Liverpool, if anyone had never heard of Tarwick before. Each generation has left its own mark, from purchasing buildings to tractors costing £300 maybe in the 50s. Combine harvest is £600. To my generation now, where a tractor is £250,000 and a combine is over £500,000. This is why the BPR bar has been set too low in this recent budget. Just last week I was up on a roof. It was a grain store roof that my dad put up in 1985. We actually very quickly outgrew it. And I remember this shed being put up because it's probably one of my earliest memories. I was so excited because there was this big crane in the yard lifting these trusses up. And we had a barn warming party. I don't know how we had the time, but we did it, and it was actually in July. It was the same night as Live Aid. I remember it vividly because my uncle was climbing up the sides of the shed, and my auntie was telling him off. And I actually asked my mum how old he would have been then. I think he'd have been 34, so I thought, to me, he was always a lot older. Well, obviously now I'm older than him, and I'm trying to think whether I'd do the same thing if we had a new barn when there's kids watching. Maybe not. So, although the storm had stopped on the Monday, there's still a massive storm raging at the moment, and it's kind of come from not that far down the road on the 30th of October, whenever it was. And that one's still liable to destroy a lot of businesses in this room. I questioned why I was on the roof. And I thought, you know, the business used to be about building assets and making it the business better and more sustainable going forwards. And I thought to myself, all I'm actually doing now is by repairing this building, I'm increasing the value back to how it was. And when this shed was put up, it probably cost, I don't know, £4,000 or £5,000. If you were to build that shed today, it'd be £50,000. With a broken roof, it might have been worth 20. Well, now I've fixed the roof, it's back to that £40,000-50,000, which then attracts a 20% tax bill to my children. And when you question what you're doing every day, it's just not right, is it? It won't be 45,000 farmers. Be 250,000. Be farmers, it'll be family businesses, and all their employees.
Employ 13.8 million business matters. Like farming families, family business owners themselves see themselves as custodians or stewards of their businesses for generations to come. They invest in their businesses, creating growth, innovation, and jobs, as they have done for generations. And they seek to pass the business on to the next generation to continue to do the same. Businesses now need to spend money putting plans in place to avoid taxes where they can, or worse than that, create or build funds to pay for future IHT liabilities. And some will have no choice but in due course to sell some or part of the business, possibly to overseas buyers to fund liability on the death of an owner. Businesses do not want to be shackled with growth inhibitors or legislation that prevents growth and investment. This afternoon, you will hear from leading business bodies, family business owners and influencers on the challenges posed by the budget and why the government needs to engage, consult and listen to the...
But it is also my first day on the West End stage, so I hope somebody will see this picture of me. So, in case you are unfamiliar with the CLA, I bumped into somebody just now and said, "You've been very quiet." I said, "Oh my God, I've been speaking every single day since the budget in every single possible place. I think we've had more than 4,000 media hits in that time. So we're all doing everything we can to make noise." And why is the loss of IHT relief potentially disastrous for family businesses and farms? Well, according to the Chancellor because our investments in our businesses, which we've done, by the way, either by borrowing money from the bank or out of our taxed profits, is an attack. We've been hoarding. I've read this the first time recently. We've been hoarding assets. I thought we were farming, but apparently we were hoarding assets. And those assets themselves have been hoarding personal wealth. And this is just, I think this is at the heart of what's gone wrong here. We know that business property relief and agricultural property relief are business there to save our business assets. They're not about what we've got tucked away somewhere else, which will be which will be taxed in the normal way. It's about protecting multi-generational businesses. So, to the Chancellor, were I to be taking over an economy showing a very, very modest amount of growth, and if I had absolutely no experience of running a business, no idea, apparently, of the difference between the balance sheet and the profit and loss, if I had been elected on a promise of growth, I think I'd seek wise words from somebody else. I think I'd accept in humility that I don't know everything. And if my eyes lit on inheritance tax, and in particular for today, business property relief, I'd be very tempted to ask this wise person, why did a Labour government in 1976 bring in a relief for multi-generational businesses on their inheritance tax? And because that was in 1976, obviously we'd have to get past the bit where we discussed whether 76 was in fact the year when we had walking on the beaches, or was that the following year? And we'd have a little trip down memory lane because it came immediately before the winter of discontent, which I remember extremely clearly. 15% on a good working wage is a big addition for that business to find. But you're going to bring down the level at which we are liable to pay national insurance contributions. You're going to raise the national minimum living wage, whichever way you call it now, which is fine, but we don't pay the minimum wage. We've always paid at least £1 more than the minimum wage. And everybody else in the business has to have a differentiation that goes on above that. So when we raise the minimum wage above inflation for the second or third year in a row, that's going to affect everybody in the business. 2 years when our insurance premiums have gone up by at least 30%. So these are just endless attacks on our business. And also, obviously, some of us have had small business rate relief, and that's going next year. We call it the Let's Go Surfing defence. Let's just stop doing this. Let's stop paying our taxes. Let's stop doing all the things that are making us have sleepless nights. Scale everything away and go to the beach. But it's okay, we're told by the Chancellor, because these new changes are not going to affect very many people. And I was asked last week at the EFRA Select Committee, were you consulted on these changes to inheritance tax? To which, of course, I had to say, no, we weren't asked at all, and it's not like we hadn't been making representations to the Treasury throughout the years in the run-up to this change. So, no, we weren't consulted. They said, do you think that they've made any plans? They asked this of the young man from the Institute of Fiscal Studies, and he said, impact assessment, no, we didn't look at that. So you didn't have any idea at all what the outcome of this was going to be from the advice you were giving to the Treasury at that time. And that part of that, from the engineers through to the people who make the equipment and so on. You might think to yourself, actually, I think we can squeeze a few more years out of the dairy we've got, and that investment won't happen either. So in every way, we need to be saying to the Chancellor, this is not a few people will be affected. This is our entire community that will be affected. Are they going to move? Are they going to change? And it seems really difficult to persuade number 11 not to be filled with pride and resoluteness, which is misplaced, and to actually start talking and listening to the people whose businesses are going to fall back or die away as a result of these choices. All of these choices, not just the inheritance tax choices.
This has not only increased cost, but added delays to the jobs that we do. Jobs that would take 5 days now take 6 or 7. This, on the back of that, as a practical basis, has presented a large operational challenge, as our drivers are only allowed to go into the EU for 90 days in 180. On a recent visit to Parliament, looking for support, we were advised to either employ European drivers or go into another industry. Our British drivers are highly skilled and we spend a lot of time training them. So we weren't able to obviously offer that as a service. Every time we transit through Calais, we have ongoing issues with migrants trying to illegally enter our vehicles. Earlier this year, we were fined £66,000 after 6 migrants entered one of our vehicles. You know, the same migrants that cross the channel daily on dinghies. We were told by Border Force that our driver had done nothing wrong. That's the same Border Force that's allowed 30,000 migrants into the country this year. Eventually, after 6 months of worry, concern and appeals, our fine was dropped, but our driver was still fined £1,500. So, the impact of the budget. More sleepless nights. Do we want to grow our business? Why would we? Continue to grow and pay our corporation tax on profits. We are now looking at ways of protecting our business from being destroyed when eventually our shareholders die. Instead of investing and growing that business, we are looking to put aside money for when the inevitable happens. When sadly my uncle and father die, with the proposed legislation, we will need to find £6 million to continue running our business that we have worked in for 25 years. We will need to sell assets that are crucial for running our business, our yards, our warehouses, our trucks. Like farms without land, a transport company without vehicles does not transport many goods.
Business, and not just our business, but many of the family businesses that have been represented and we are aware of. So, our example, our business is worth about £30 million. So with this update to the business property relief, for the business to be passed from one generation to the next, we will have an inheritance tax bill for about £6 million. The 1 million allowance doesn't really make a significant difference to this. This is the 20% the government have stated as half the normal rate of inheritance tax. But the reality is actually quite different. Our family doesn't have this type of money, so the only way to pay it is somehow to take it out of the business. And I think it's already been said, but our options are limited. The drastic option is we just sell the entire business, or we sell a proportion of the business, or do we battle on and take out a massive loan? Looking at the first two options, there's no guarantee that a company coming in to buy us or part of the business will continue in the same way. Will they share the same interest in our staff and our communities? The jobs we've created could well be lost. Maybe a foreign business where profits will not be reinvested but removed from the country. There'll be less competition, which could mean an increase in prices and then the ongoing increase in inflation that will surely follow. And overall, it actually means there will be a decrease in the tax the company is paid.
Wage, clear them off the landscape, Lakeland clearances as we would refer to it in our part of the world, clear them off the landscape, and who takes it on? Massive equity firms in London or more likely overseas. That is not egalitarian, that is not progressive, that is immoral, and that is wrong. And not only is it wrong because it is against every measure of equity and fairness you could think of, it is also wrong because it takes land out of active food production. Only 55% of the food we eat in the UK is produced here in the UK, and that is wrong, and that is foolish, and that is stupid. During the pandemic and in the times during the war in Ukraine with Putin's evil invasion of that sovereign country, we have seen times where those things have affected the complacency of the average shopper in the UK, who expects to go to the supermarket and see shelves full in every single aisle. And we now know the shortness of our supply chains means that you could find yourself in a position with empty shelves almost at any given time. For us not to be able to produce the food we need to a higher degree than 55% is incredibly stupid for any country that values its security, food security, or any other kind of security. It's happening to British farming. I worry that an even more immediate blow to British farming from the budget is the 76% massive drop in the basic payment that will come next year. That's something that farmers weren't planning for, and it will mean the difference between a tenant being able to afford their rent and a tenant not being able to afford their rent. And so much of the focus over the last few weeks about the budget has been the impact on owner-occupiers, on landowners. 1,500 farmers in my patch, like I say. We think 400 to 500 will be directly affected by the family farm tax, but that hasn't factored in all the tenants whose landlords will now, panic-stricken, look to restructure their businesses and find the tenants could potentially be out on their ear also. And the consequences are dire and they are huge. I want to say,
core supply is construction equipment, light, medium and heavy, so a full gamut of equipment. Interestingly, the light business of construction machinery goes into building, as you'd expect, but a massive amount goes into rental and the domestic market. So again, touching, let's call it Joe Public, the man in the street. Medium is into building and business, and heavy is into plant hire, demolition, which we see a lot of, and heavy excavation. A slightly smaller business, nevertheless the impact is significant. 18.5 million turnover, 23 people. National insurance implication is £25,000, and the impact on national wage is £2,500. So £27,500 to that relatively small business. SD is into farming, storage and general bulk haulage. So very similar to Ed earlier this morning. £18 million turnover, 128 people, £145,000 of national insurance contribution impact, 125,000 of minimum wage. Their calculation on the adjustment to their skilled employees is £340,000. That's a total of 610 into that business. Business E, a community-owned pub in rural Norfolk. Quite a common story where the publicans have gone bankrupt and the residents have gotten together and taken over the pub. It has a 50-seat restaurant. It produces or serves up very high quality food and has an excellent reputation locally. The turnover of the business is £360,000. They have 4 full-time employees and 22 part-time serving staff, etc. The impact of national insurance is £1,500. The impact of the minimum wage is £4,000. And the impact of adjusting the skill of the higher chefs and management team is £13,400. Now, what is interesting to this business is that there are some slight changes in the E&I relief to businesses, which has kind of made the numbers look a little bit unbalanced, but that's the reason for it.
And I have been doing this with my team of brilliant shadow ministers with Kemi Badenoch in the House of Commons as best we can. In fact, 2 weeks ago, we forced a debate and a vote in the House of Commons specifically on APR and BPR, because we did not want those Labour MPs who represent rural constituencies to think that they could hide away behind the finance bill in 6 months' time and vote these changes in. We wanted them to understand what this means for the farms and the family businesses across the United Kingdom, but particularly in their constituencies. And by the way, I'm a proud Lincolnshire Member of Parliament. My constituency of Loughton Horncastle genuinely can lay claim to being one of the breadbaskets of the United Kingdom, so I very much understand the pain. Thank you! Shout out for Lincolnshire, the pain that our farms are going through. But as part of that debate, I asked you to share your stories with me so that I could bring your stories into the chamber of the House of Commons. Because we understand that you're not just numbers on a spreadsheet, you are the families that work day in, day out, whose children are helping out on the farms as soon as they can squeeze a pair of wellies onto their feet. You are the families that this Christmas Day will be having your fun and enjoying Christmas Day, but you'll also be out on the farm, feeding livestock, making sure that everything is ticking over whilst everybody else is enjoying the Christmas lunches that you and other farmers have produced. You are the families that continue working well beyond retirement age, because that's what farming is. It's not a job, it is a way of life, it is a vocation, and it is one that you have passed on through generation to generation. That is what we all want to protect. Were from a couple who wrote to me when I put the call out, please can I have your stories? They wrote to me, and they, I think, show not just the hard work, the commitment, the sacrifice actually that people make in farming and family businesses, but they also showed the emotional toll that this uncertainty and having the rug pulled out from under your feet is taking on families up and down the country. And so I'm here today to introduce Steve and Wendy, who can tell their story with great eloquence and great compassion, but also with some pain. Thank you so much, everybody.
I didn't expect to be on the stage today, but I thought, as a manufacturer, an industrialist, I thought it could be a good place to be. So, a little bit of history. My family, my mum, my dad, my brother and myself started a business in the 1970s when I was a young man. When I left school, engineering was our thing, so both me and my brother trained as engineers. We've since gone on to build a fairly substantial business up in Derbyshire. Now that wasn't easy actually to do, because we had to fight against the planners. So in 1988, we actually applied for change of use on a farm, so I feel that we're really one of the first families, should I say, to actually diversify. So that diversification has been correct. So actually, at appeal, we managed to get past the pig park and we got our planning permission granted. So since that point, we've had constant, it's borrow the money, work and invest back in your company. And that's what we've done for the last 34 years. My father retired at 88 during COVID. My grandfather worked with us. When he retired, when he was in his mid-60s, he worked with us, and I had the opportunity to work with him for 16 years in our company. So my mum worked till she was 73 in our company. And I feel that we've just been led astray. Everything we thought we were working for over all those years of constant effort. I could say, and I've said to to the people that talk to me, I'm brain damaged with work and time and effort that I've put in that factory to make it work. I mean, now, we do all our own maintenance, we do everything. I'm very lucky, I've got a good team of people, close team of people that I consider as close friends that I work with. My son-in-law now works for me, my daughter works for me, my brother, who's his son and his daughter work for the firm. But we find ourselves in a very strange predicament. My dad is now 92. My mum passed away 2 years ago, so her shares have had to transfer. They transferred to my father, but you have to hold your shares. So he could. There's been a little bit of a company reorganisation, so me and my brother ended up demerging 2 or 3 years ago. So my mum and dad had to hold their shares. We didn't know what was going to happen in the budget, so my mum's shares passed to my father. My father now is faced with a £550,000 bill because of this change at the stroke of a pen from a government that doesn't want to understand. And I think that's the problem. They just simply don't want to understand. They don't want to know our stories. They don't want to know where we've come from. They don't want to know our struggles. So,
we aren't on our own.
no, we're not on our own. Absolutely. So I thought, right, how can we diversify our business yet again? My daughter says to me, Dad, you've got more ideas than time in your head. I'm always full of energy. I'm always full of the zest for life. But I think it's been dragged away from me. And I feel deflated. I feel, I don't know. I can't explain.
Can I just tell you all that when the farmers, I'm the farming part of the duo. I obviously help Steve with the business as well, but I was brought up on a tenanted farm. I'm the youngest of 3 girls, and we all grew up doing everything a man can do, and probably bake the Sunday lunch at the same time. But we were lucky enough to be able to borrow enough money to buy the small farm next to where I was brought up, which was tenanted. And it needed a bit of work, to be quite honest. And over the last 34 years, the profits from the business, we've invested in that farm, because obviously there's no profit to be had in farming, especially when you're buying it from scratch. I know we're looking at a lot of generational farmers and you've got your own problems, but from our point of view, we've invested everything we've got into the farm, and currently I've got a small herd of Derbyshire Gritstons, which we both enjoy.
You do.
You have a bit of time off the factory to go and help haymake. The whole family comes together and does it. It's a familiar story. We're in it for the life's work, isn't it? It's not for the profit necessarily. It's all invested back in.
It is.
So when all the farmers were down in London a few weeks ago, I was stuck up at the farm thinking, do you know what? I feel like I'm not doing anything towards this. So I just penned a very quick letter to Elizabeth, because I'd heard her.
Victoria.
Victoria, yes, Victoria. I'd heard her talking in Parliament, and I thought, this is. I'm just going to tell it like it is. I just wrote it all down, pretty much what I've just said to you. Coming from a tenanted farm, putting everything into the farm that we now own. He's in industry. I've never seen him so stressed. He had a bleed on the brain in June. It could have been sayonara. He's made a brilliant recovery. But who's going to insure him to cover all this?
Nobody.
That we've now got? We would have to sell the farm that we've worked so hard to create from nothing. So it's very, very distressing.
Just one other thing. I thought, well, I'd try to pass on some investment. Okay. So we've managed to secure an industrial site with B1, B2 and B8 use in Chesterfield. Now we've managed to purchase at massive cost to ourselves and mostly from the bank, this 7-acre site. Now it's a greenfield site, brownfield. So at the moment we're using part of it for a stockyard relating to the business, but the rest of it, there's 4 acres of developable land there. Now, that I was wanting to get single-use businesses into probably 20,000 square foot buildings, which is a fair sized building, but I find myself wondering whether I should be investing £2 to £3 million in making that project happen. I find myself, why would I do that? Why would I do that?
Labour did not. So once in government, everything has flowed from those promises that they wouldn't rise tax money, they wouldn't put in tax rises on income, VAT and NI contributions. And I believe the reason so many people in the business communities are so angry is that they then came for all of you and pretty much no one else for that tax money. Now this was a political decision on behalf of Labour. They boxed themselves in because they didn't have the guts to be honest with the electorate. Now I'm going to come to our brilliant panel. Cost to business that recent budget put in place. So family firms pay 200 billion in tax receipts annually in this country. The oldest family firm dates back to 1515. There are 4.8 million family firms in the UK who employ between them a staggering 13.8 million people. They generate 1.7 trillion in turnover. And it has been calculated that these changes at the recent budget can reduce economic activity by 9.4 billion. James Dyson, the founder of Dyson, began his firm as a small family firm, and he was one of the first voices to come out and fight for many of you. And it suited the current government to try and paint him as some grasping rich man trying to lower his tax bill. He is one of the highest taxpayers in this country, and as he wrote in his letter to the Telegraph, he began as a small family firm. And he has said, and I completely agree with him, the combination of national insurance increases and changes to an inheritance tax on family businesses will kill entrepreneurship, snuff out wealth creation, and stunt growth in the economy. He went on to say, destruction of British family-owned businesses, especially, is an egregious act of self-harm. Now, Jonathan Roberts, I'd like to come to you first. Do you agree with what James Dyson has said, and why?
Look, I think this has probably been the biggest attack on, let's call it the rural way of life, but particularly the family farm, for a generation or more. And it's not just about this particular tax change. There's so many different things that are going on at the moment where costs are rising. I mean, in normal times, we might be talking more about things like the fertiliser tax, which has hardly even got a mention because there have been so many other attacks. And I think the crucial thing for us all to remember is how unnecessary this is. Because if the Chancellor of the Exchequer came to you and came to us and said, look, we need to get more money into the coffers because we found ourselves in a black hole, how can we do that? Well, look, pretty much anybody who's ever worked in business of any type, whether it's farming or any other type, would say, right, we need to go for growth. Because we all know that if you have a bigger pie, then there's more money going into the Exchequer. And that was more or less the basis on which they were elected.
Long term.
I mean, I think we have to take
It doesn't make economic sense in the long term.
I think we have to take that conversation further, and it's what is the impact on public services, because that's the bit that will get the public on board. And I think there was a question asked earlier about why the farmers are leading, why businesses haven't come in so fast behind. You know, we're one of the members of the Independent Family Brewers of Britain, and there's been lots of conversation about when we should come out in solidarity with the family farmers. And actually the reality is we're waiting for the conversation to move from succession, inheritance, asset sales, until it gets to, I think, where we are almost at, which is what this means is an erosion of the tax base, reduced receipts for the Treasury, and therefore that must flow through to detrimental public services.
But also reduced investment in family firms, and people are sitting around right now having conversations about job cuts.
I mean, realistically, you're right. That's 6.7 million that's going to come out. It's either going to come out of future investment, or it's going to come out of our existing factors of production, our assets, and yes, there are jobs associated with that.
So
You're looking at hospitality businesses, and they are across the community, and they are often, the family businesses are in areas of the greatest economic deprivation across our rural and coastal communities, as well as in our town and city centres.
But they're in our high streets,
and they're in our high streets as well. So they are in every part of every community, and they provide jobs and growth and opportunities for those who are often the furthest from the jobs market, and they are local jobs. So they are able to provide work and meaningful opportunities for people who are walking to work, mums who are working while they're having children, and they're also an integral part of a local ecosystem. And I think that often gets overlooked. You know,
suppliers.
The supply chain will often be local farmers, local food manufacturers, local artisan producers, local brewers will be providing a route through. And
but also tourism in sort of larger regional cities like York.
Yes.
The restaurants there, the hospitality, the pubs. This is a huge draw for tourists.
It's a huge draw for tourists. It's a £140 billion sector of the economy. It's 5% of GDP. It's 11% of employment. 3.5 million people work. And crucially, it generates almost 40% of that turnover goes back to the Exchequer in the form of taxes funding vital public services. that 54 billion is roughly the police and security budget. You look at, again, the thing that people keep saying is, you're looking ahead, as Tom very eloquently said, you're looking ahead at future investment, but actually we have a cliff edge and a huge tsunami of extra costs and taxes coming in April of this year, and it's hitting those that are the lowest paid on part-time work, and it's hitting those rural job opportunities, businesses, and it's going to increase prices for consumers. So before we get to how do we pass on that asset as a family business, how do we make sure we're supporting those family businesses in the ecosystem across our communities? You've got this deluge of tax, £3.4 billion of extra tax.
That's before we even come to Angela Rayner's workers' bill, which is going to increase complexity for so many businesses, especially in hospitality, where you've got a very high proportion of your business is human.
Well, this is a hugely regressive tax that was introduced in the budget. It hits the lowest paid part-time workers. So for somebody in our sector who works 20 hours a week on minimum wage, the effective tax rate for the employer in that sector is 75%. It's gone up by. For somebody who's full-time on national living wage, the tax has gone up by 37%. So we're seeing for many of these family businesses, rural businesses in particular, a third of them are operating at or below break-even. A quarter of them have no cash reserves. So they simply won't withstand the economic shock. So there will be nothing to pass on because they will just hand in the keys, close the businesses. That's what we're hearing from an awful lot of them. And 85% of our sector saying they're going to have to cut staff hours
I think
and
something
headcount. Family pubs and restaurants, they're employing 20 to 30 people directly, a huge number in the supply chain. Our local hotels, many of those are family businesses. They are employing about 100 people. And so when you lose those assets, if they decide to close because of the cumulative tax and regulatory burden, or they feel that they can't go on, that's job losses throughout a local community, but it's assets and community spaces that are lost for good.
But making up these local high streets, because you're talking about hospitality, but retail goes hand in hand. It's about bringing people into small town centres, large town centres, and as I've said, in small villages across the whole of the country, and I'm someone who does travel, my family live up north, I travel a lot. These are often villages which are literally the only local employment is in hospitality, is in local retail, and these are huge tourism drivers. And again, tourism doesn't seem to be talked about enough. Tourism brings in billions upon billions of pounds of revenue.
Well, our foreign visitors spend more eating and drinking out in our hospitality venues across the UK than all of our food and drink exports put together. It's our second largest export earner, and it's the fastest growing, but we put it into reverse our peril.
Jeremy, I'm going to come to you with one thing, but I just want one last question to Kate. I get a lot of people just saying, and I've had many discussions with my husband about this, why not just pass more costs over to your consumer? And I can tell you what most people say in hospitality right now as well. We've already passed huge costs over. There comes a point where no one's going to keep paying.
There comes a point when customers won't pay,
Yeah.
and then you see reduced footfall, you see reduced demand, and you see reduced volumes. If we were to pass on that £3.4 billion of extra costs and taxes in prices to our consumers, we're going to have to put our prices up by around 10 to 15%. That's not sustainable.
That makes empty restaurants, empty lunch times.
Yeah, and so you have the law of diminishing returns that Tom was describing, because if you turn that footfall away, we're property intensive and we're labour intensive, and that £54 billion of tax
As is retail, as is many sectors. Yeah. Jeremy, I want to come to you last. Introduce this Labour in 1976. So Rachel Reeves, who by the way has never run a business of her own, and has spent most of her career as an opposition MP, which I can tell you is not that much hard work compared to someone who is running a business. I don't understand that they're actually reversing something that Labour bought in. And one of their big, and this again comes back to a big communications campaign that is coming from within Westminster, they are deliberately trying to put very confusing tax messages out because they want the public to not support you. I've got to say, you have to sort of work in politics to understand what's happening right now. Can you just clarify for everybody in simple messages why, from a tax perspective, this just doesn't make sense?
I think the first point to make is that this is simply that the tax measure here is simply one that converts owners' capital into current public spending, and in doing so, crowding out private investment. And right at the start, as Jonathan was talking about, growth is what is needed. That requires capital and it requires business enterprise, and this undermines both. You allude to 1976. There is an awful lot going on at the moment, which is simply the revisiting of past mistakes. 1976 was the first point at which Labour started unpicking its capital transfer tax of 1975 at the rates of tax that it introduced then. And the introduction of business property relief was the first step in terms of what is now the inheritance tax that has been at 100% since 1992. And so the position then is simply that we are now being asked to go through the hoops all over again, at cost to the businesses as has just been described. There are a number of areas where the discussion has been very muddled. It is avoiding, muddying the waters to talk about the nil rate bands at this point. So I think it is worth just going a little bit further into the detail. The Treasury is suggesting that, of course, not just the million, and any number of family members you're apparently unable to conjure up for the purposes of business planning. Conventionally, it takes about 25 years to get somebody from conception through to adult participation in a business, but we're obviously assumed to do it quite quickly here. But the nil rate bands that are transferable between spouses, that assumes, the main nil rate band assumes that you have no personal effects. You don't even own the bed that you die in. They're assuming that can be put all against the business. No, most people, particularly when we get to April 27 and the pension funds come in, most people are going to have enough call on that nil rate band before the business. And similarly, the £175,000 is on a house that you give to a lineal descendant. Well, for many that will be outside the business, and even in farming where it may be within the business, it's normally on the excess above agricultural value that is taxed already, so it doesn't come into play on that. And of course tenants can't give the house down anyway. So the misleading presentation that there's 3 million you can give down if you're a married couple, technically in very, very special and particular circumstances you can do it, but not most ordinary people. And this is where waters are being muddied on all of this. So work from the million, look at the hit that has, spread it over 10 years, look at your income that you've got to pay that, and then think about whether you can invest. And I think that's the real economic message in this, going back right to where Jonathan started on growth. Without capital, without investment, without business spirit, there is no growth, despite all the language that the government has used.
Thank you very much, Jeremy.
Where I thought I'd be spending mid-Christmas. And I wouldn't believe the stuff that they have backstage as well. It's fantastic. This is how I'm starting my panto season, and hopefully I'll be able to get my kids out very soon. But what I have to discuss today really is no joke. And I just wanted to let all of you know that as the Conservative Party leader, and also as an MP for a rural constituency, a constituency that has many small businesses, I understand what it is that you are dealing with, who understand how the business works and how to keep it surviving. And so that's why we're really disappointed that Labour is cutting that 100% relief for assets over £1 million. We know that scrapping BPR is going to be incredibly damaging. Yes, it is true, we do need to fund public services, but you have to do that in the right way. It's no good simply rushing somewhere and grabbing money you can see. If you damage the business that's underneath, it will not be able to create more growth, more profit, more taxes for the next year. We have to do this in the right way. If inheritance tax applies to these assets that small businesses have painstakingly built over time, they may not exist again. And that is why we are opposed to the decisions that they have made on agricultural property relief and on business property relief. This decision is going to drain investment and growth out of the British economy. And my team have been doing a lot of research into what the impact of this new change is going to be. Research done by CBI Economics shows that Labour's changes to BPR could cause 125,000 job losses. So just for some context, that figure is equivalent to the entire population of Blackburn. That's a lot of people That's a lot of jobs. Where are they going to go afterwards? The CBI also said that those changes would mean family businesses will have to cut investment. They'll have to cut it by over 16%. They'll also have to reduce headcount. So it's not just about no longer being able to invest in the business, it's about removing jobs which currently exist. 10.2%, losing turnover of 7.4%. That is a lot. In aggregate, it comes to about £2.6 billion of a loss in tax revenue. The government says it is doing these things to raise taxes. We believe that actually it's going to shrink the tax take because it will destroy the businesses that provide that income. CBI Economics also says it will hit total economic output by 9.4 billion. That 85% of family businesses plan to decrease that investment. More than half of them, more than half of family businesses think that they're going to be letting people go. We cannot afford this. And I think that as an opposition, we need to make sure that we are holding the government to account. I'm not here to make lots of jokes about them. You would have heard all the jokes about CVs and them never running a business and needing freebies, but I think this is really serious. It is really serious. We need the government to understand how business works. If you look at the economy today, you'll find that fewer and fewer people are entrepreneurs. Our economy is becoming more and more bureaucratic. We have fewer people starting businesses. We have fewer people going into agriculture. It's too difficult. Everyone wants to do what's easy. Yeah. And so we end up creating a bureaucratic class that doesn't really understand how stuff works. And when people like that get into government, they make changes like the ones we've seen to APR and BPR, which are damaging. And that is why today I can tell you that we will reverse this damaging tax grab at the earliest opportunity. It is absolutely essential that we go back to how things work. We had a budget in March that was able to deliver funding for public services without this sort of damaging tax cut. It cannot be done again. The reason why Labour is going for these taxes is because it's choosing to spend money in places that it does not need to, places that are not essential public services. But we understand the contribution small and family business make to the UK economy. You often hear us talking about being the party of business. Sometimes people think that we're the party of big business. We are not. We are the party of entrepreneurs. We're the party of every business. Because we know that it is not government that creates growth. It is business that creates growth. And actually, a lot of the time, government needs to get out of the way. And that's what I'm offering you today. The Conservative Party is under new leadership. We know that we made a lot of mistakes. We're not here to pretend that everything was fine when we were in government. And life is difficult, times are tough, not just in this country, but across the world. But I know that if we don't do right by those people who are starting out, who are entrepreneurs, who are creating small businesses, family businesses, medium-sized enterprises, we're not going to have those big businesses of the future. And we also need to think about the next generation. I am very worried that many young people look out and feel that there is no hope for them. They can't afford their student loans, they can't afford mortgages, they can't afford to start a family. We need to give them hope. I would like to see so many more of them doing what you do. Everyone in this audience remembers when they first started their business, or when they first took over from their parent or from their grandparent, and what that was like. You had hope, you had optimism, you thought tomorrow was going to be a lot better. Many young people today do not believe that tomorrow is going to be better, and we need to change that. So we will reverse this damaging tax, and we won't just have a charm offensive with you, like other parties telling you what you want to hear. We are going to show you that we understand and that we are going to deliver. So on behalf of the Conservative Party, I want to say thank you for bringing this to us, and I want to let you know that we are on your side. We understand what you're dealing with, and we are going to fix it. Thank you very much, everybody. Finding out where the problem is most acute, and then we can work with local communities to make sure the pressure is brought to bear, not just on the people in the cabinet, but actually individual MPs. And I say this as an MP myself. You do not know the power that you have. You focus it locally on those individuals who should be standing in the way of this change, but are going along with it. You will have many members of parliament who have probably voted in favour of this. You need to let them know how you feel, and we will support you in that wherever we can. We need to make sure that in holding the government to account, we bring the rest of the public with us. At the moment, people, especially those in urban communities, have thought, oh, this is something just about farmers. It's got nothing to do with me. It's just like the miners' strike. It's just something that impacts a small group of people. What I can do as leader of the opposition is show the knock-on effect, how it's going to impact everybody. What happens to farmers impacts everybody. What happens to small business owners impacts everyone. It impacts your community. Your prices will go up, jobs will disappear, the supply chain starts to fragment. That's one of the things that we can do. We need to tell the story of why this matters, not just to those of us who are sitting in here, or those who might be watching on TV. It matters to every single person in our society. And we have a platform to tell those stories. That's what I will be doing as leader of the opposition, telling your story so that even those people who are not directly impacted understand that one way or another, they will pay the price too. Thank you.
We just got out of the conference and it was really good. We had such amazing, incredible speakers. We had Kemi as well, from the Conservative Party leader. Also managed to get a photo with her. But what really got me about her is she was really trying to help young people, and also not just young people in agriculture, but young people, entrepreneurs. And I think that was really, really a positive thing to look forward to in the future. But yeah, thank you to everyone who organised it, like Ollie and Wardy's Waffle and Martin, etc. Anyway, we had such a great day, well organised. Thank you everyone. We're now stuck in London. We were all meant to get out and help, but Dan's locked me in the car. But thanks for watching everyone. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Here's all the content from today, those of you that want to watch it and have missed it.
Won't be a minute.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to tow this van.
I mean, yeah. What, just pull it on the wheel? Yeah. Sorry. That's all right. I don't think that'll come off. Yeah, that. I think that'll be all right. Right.
Whoa, whoa! Stand out! Has he found somewhere? Where's his coat?
Right, because it's locked up.
Well done, Dan. Oh.